he gets tired of building up, so decides to build underneath. And then there's just all this insane stuff. And he, it's the sort of thing that it could get bogged down in these details, but he just has this way of describing individual cogs and the way they fit together and move together, and just the minutest detail that is it doesn't get lost in mechanics. There's a beauty to it somehow, and it's so. Anyway, that's one of the things that that reminded me of that was this story here, that Alex, where you have you have to fit in all of these different things about how he works and how he gets this knowledge and all of these, but and then also there's this. Are either one of you parents? No. Okay, so that's also you pulled off very well this motherly concern, and like there's this idea too of, would somebody have a maternal instinct for a non-biological child?
Right.
And yeah, so I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. So you're talking about like the details that you put into magical realism, and that's something I think about a lot, that balance, because you want to put in enough that they can understand the world, but if you put in too much, then it invites questions that might tear your world apart. I was thinking about this when I saw Us by Jordan Peele's newest,
which I have not seen yet.
Yeah. I won't spoil it, but basically, and I loved it. I love that movie. At the end, things are kind of explained, like the horror element is kind of explained. And that was like the one thing I didn't really like, because suddenly, as soon as this one thing was said, I had all of these questions that sort of tore down the world for me. And instead of just accepting and suspending my disbelief, I was trying to figure out technically how all of these, I was figuring out the technicalities. And so that's something I think we struggled with some of our stories. I'm remembering it mostly with maybe the time travel story, where you want to suggest enough that they understand what's happening. But if you start explaining too much, then the magic is lost. Yeah. And you're just thinking of it as this realistic technical thing.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's to me like the difference between, and I have read a fair amount of science fiction in over my lifetime, but the difference between somebody like an Arthur C. Clarke and a Philip K. Dick versus somebody like Bradbury or somebody who works in science fiction but also tells a decent story.
Right. Yeah. And like getting bogged down in the minutia of like, how does this work is like not as interesting, I don't think.
Yeah, that's not why we're writing it. That's not what we're interested in.
Right. It's like you need enough so that it's like, okay, I get it. But also I think it's pretty believable for someone to be like, I have a time machine. I don't know how it works. But like, like people don't know how Wi-Fi works. And like we're all, we use it and like we understand it. So like that also feels like verisimilitude. Like we don't have to. And that's, I think, that's where genre boundaries are useful and useless at the same time, because like, I don't know, I don't really want to define as one thing. Like it's a little sci-fi, it's definitely magical realism, but it's, I don't know, I just want it to be like a story that means something and hits you in the heart.
The classroom under the classroom, it sounds like you guys took this cautionary tale, like that somebody, it sounds like the sort of thing that somebody's like, well, you don't want to have to go down there if you misbehave and all that sort of thing, but make it an actual thing.
Yeah. And I've definitely done that as a teacher, where I have like these threats that I don't have no intention of following through with.
No way to back up, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that was actually advice someone gave. They're like, just threaten to send them to third grade for a day and that'll shape them up. Like, and if they're bad enough, do it. And then, But it's like taking a thing that someone said it kind of as a joke and like taking it further in the story was part of the pleasure.
Yeah. Well, and turning it into this kind of like tense psychological horror sort of situation. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think it's one of our creepier stories.
Yeah, definitely. Our first one.
And it's our first one we wrote together.
Yeah. The story with the zombie dads. I think I started that one. And I remember being in teacher training, and someone was giving like an active shooter drill sort of training, and they said anything can be a weapon. And I wrote that down because that's so dark and interesting. And so that's where that story came from, this idea of, okay, why would anything have to be a weapon other than, you know, the obvious real world reasons.
Now, what was the, you know, you have this this thematic thing of the classroom and these worksheets and so forth, and but you guys work it's different aspects of education and that sort of thing that are involved in all of it too. So what was the sort of rule for yourself as far as, you know, maintaining the thematic, but not, you know, being too tied down by it?
Yeah, that's something that we talked about, definitely, and sort of had to edit into what it is. We had conversations about, okay, do we want it to just be primary school? Do we want it to go to high school? I think we originally had some high school stories that we aged the kids down a bit because it didn't feel like it fit.
Yeah, I think it was just like, okay, if we have a theme, the collection will make more sense. And so we're like, okay, it'll be school, but like, what does that mean? Because you have teachers and parents and students and the summer, you know, like all of those things. And like the crushes you have in, you know, math class that you see outside of school, that's part, like it's everywhere. I feel like I've been in school 90% of my life. And it really informs you, especially when you're a kid and you're kind of trapped with these people from like K to 8, you know, unless you move. And that's kind of interesting. It's like a weird petri dish where your teachers are in charge and you have these power dynamics with your classmates, and you see it, like we remember what it's like being in grade school, but it's also really weird seeing it from the other end. It's like, I'm in charge of these kids and I'm seeing them go through things I remember going through, and I can't like help them at the lunch table. Like I can't, you know, whisper in their ear, like, don't say that. You're going to lose them. But yeah, you kind of have to rewatch and re-remember what it was like to be that age.
Yeah, I was going to ask how easy is it for you to recall that kind of, that you've been on that side and not get too jaded by being on the other side of the desk, you know?
Oh yeah, I feel like it's easy. In some days I forget, but it's easy for me to remember what it was like being a kid. I think we were probably both pretty sensitive kids who like try to follow the rules all the time.
Yes.
And remember every single time we got in trouble.
Yes. Oh yeah. I even remember like the time I cheated once in like,
Melissa.
I know, in 5th grade. And like, not only did I cheat, but I like had a terrible lie. I said like, my study guide fell down in my desk, like, and I happened to see the answer because I was like,
the wind blew it.
Yeah, I was like eaten up by guilt because like I didn't know the answer to a question, and I felt like such a bad kid for not preparing. But then I cheated, and I couldn't live with that either. But yeah, I remember it too, and I think there's like certain kids who I'd be like, oh, was I was like you, wasn't I? You're a little bit like I was.
Yeah, and I try to, like, I'll say to the kids, you know, the worst feeling I had as a kid was when I would get in trouble, but it didn't feel like my fault, and the teacher just wouldn't listen and didn't understand. And I catch myself as a teacher doing that sometimes, where I will, like, talk to a kid or discipline them or whatever, and they'll be like, but it wasn't my fault, you don't understand. And I try to remember what I felt like when I was in that position and apologize to them and say, hey, sorry, teachers just sometimes think they know what's going on and they don't.
Mindful teaching.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's good to apologize when you make a mistake as a teacher. It's so hard because you want to maintain this authority. But yeah, I remember doing that. And sometimes it would be like, I'm going to talk to you after class and say like, sorry, I shouldn't have like... I shouldn't have spoken to you that way, or like, you know, we could have handled that better. And I find every time I do that, things get so much better with that kid. They feel like heard and seen. And I think that's actually really useful. And then like the next time we would like look at each other, be like, are we going to make different choices this time? And like, usually it would be, yeah. And that was really rewarding too. I mean, they're just people who are shorter than me. And
And they have like the same feelings. They can't regulate them or hide them.
Sure.
Yeah. And they get, they feel it so deeply. They're like, my friend stole my pencil. And like,
we're not friends anymore.
It's over.
I had my first year teaching this huge drama at recess, and it was all about, like, I showed her my grade on the quiz and she wouldn't show me her grade on the quiz. And I don't think we're friends anymore.
That's pretty funny. And there's something about those stories that connect with that period of time in your life. Like, I will always think of it's why, like The Simpsons is so good, right? Mm-hmm. You think about the episode where Lisa is competing with the other kid and ends up ruining her diorama, and she has like the ticking of the telltale heart just like in her head. And, yeah, that guilt. But I don't think I remember a teacher ever apologizing. It's you, and then there's this instant like wall that goes up, especially when you don't feel believed, and you're like, that's it. I don't have any respect for this teacher anymore. This teacher doesn't get me. It's yeah.
And different teachers have such different philosophies. Like, I remember a couple of years ago, one student who he really misbehaved in everyone's class, but like he was good for me, and like he would like kind of stand up and be like, fight the power, like we're not doing homework today.
That's awesome.
And it was kind of awesome, and I was like, I feel you, kid. Like, I feel that way sometimes too, but like, he would come in and sometimes he'd like hide under the desk and just kind of like hold his head, and like I just like would kind of like let him be, and I'd check in with him after class started and be like, are you okay? Like, are you ready to learn? Do you need to talk to like the dean or something? And like, he told me that, there was only one person in the room he could trust, and it was like his best friend way over there. And I was like, okay, well, if I put your best friend next to you, you'll have to work. And if you seem like you're goofing around, I'm going to put him right back in his seat. And like, we kind of like made a bargain, and I'm like, okay, if you can like do your work, I will move your best friend next to you. And it was like seamless. And like, he trusted me then. And I loved that kid. He was like, kind of a pain sometimes, but like, I feel like he knew I wasn't out to just like destroy his life, but also I had expectations of him. And I think that like other people had different philosophies of just like, get out, you're ruining class.
I do think there's been this sort of trend in teaching. It's probably different from when we were kids, where maybe not everybody follows this as a teacher, but when I was in teacher training, it's you want the consequences to make sense. You want them to be logical. You want to feel like you're on the same side as the student, and that you're working together towards something, not that you're against each other.
Yeah, and sometimes you can even talk to the kid about like, okay, we know that wasn't appropriate. Like, what do you expect is going to happen because of this? And sometimes they kind of know. You're like, yeah, that sounds about right. Like, yeah, not going to recess today sounds about right.
So to get back to the book, I'm curious about a few things. But it sounds like, we are in a grand kind of way talking about the book in all of this, because this informs how you guys decided to write this and all of that. But how did you sort of shop this concept around to people? How was it? How easy was it for you guys to find a publisher? What was the process like for that?
I feel like it was it wasn't a very long process. We got really lucky. We were sending it around for maybe a year.
Yeah, and because I actually think we sent it to Goldwake the year before they took it, and actually it got
rejected the first time.
Definitely. And like, that was good because the stories got so much better, and like, that might have been before the worksheets were incorporated too.
Yeah, I forgot about that, but you might be right. We by the way made a lot of worksheets that didn't go in the book. We had some meetings. We would meet and then give each other assignments, basically like, you're going to write this, you're going to start this new story based on this idea we have, and also edit this story, and I'll do the same with different stories. And we had one meeting where we're like, okay, next time we get together, we'll each bring like 10 worksheets.
And most of them were terrible.
Right. We sort of refined how we would use them as it went on.
And thought about what would like match the process for getting the book published.
Oh, right. Yeah. So we had sent it to Goldwake Press and got rejected. And then at AWP, I stopped at their table, and they're like, if you buy a book, you can submit to our contest or our open reading period for free. And I was like, oh, you already rejected us, but I'll buy a book anyway. And they said, oh, you should submit again, because, sometimes it's different readers. Sure, we're just looking for different things. And they called us a couple months later, and it's all good from there.
I was just talking to Sally Ball about that. She was in here the other day, and she was talking about their reading process and
Right.
about people like making sure that, because there is